Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best version of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins, a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth, providing you with valuable insights and actionable tips to thrive. Sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to share their experience and expertise. Whether you're looking to improve your relationships or find greater joy, you're in the right place on your journey to becoming a better you. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome back to Coach Soul. And boy, did I leave you guys with a cliffhanger, and I hated to do that to you as my listeners, and I hated to do it to myself. But at the same time, we can't rush being able to understand stories and connectivity. Coach Soul is about connectivity. It's about bringing the disconnect back to the connected. And it's so fascinating to be able to understand that we're not alone. We think that when we're isolated, we're alone. Nobody else has gone through this. Torund, you gave us a great description of what happened to you. And we left off where you said, I've had enough. Mm-hmm. And you reached a point that you didn't want to be around this. So let's pick up there. And what did you decide to do next after all this tragedy?
It's very interesting you say that because this is really about healing. So as soon as the 9/11 happened, I went to a counselor. So it wasn't like I wasn't taking progression to healing, but there are some things the dust needs to settle, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So, and a lot of times I think with talk therapy, you're talking so much with the brain that you're really not dealing with the problems of the emotions that are stuck in the body. So fast forward, I ended up working for a congressman in the House. And to give an interesting story, the trauma gets triggered at certain moments, because I remember one time I had CNN and they wanted to interview the congressman, and we go on the terrace. So you can go from the window and you can go in, kind of like just walk out of the window. There's this beautiful terrace where you could have a lovely view,
right?
See, and you have this interview. So it's got all the components of making a news story. So we're out there, and then suddenly you have these people with machine guns and snipers coming towards you because you have broken a rule, and that was not communicated, right? But there's like this franticness of, I think everyone had a little PTSD, this franticness of overreacting, doing things. And at that point, I was kind of laughing because it just seemed like an out-of-body movie experience, not a real thing. And so we went back inside, but it was just those kinds of moments. People are just so on edge. And so I ended up actually leaving the Senate and the House and politics, and actually moved to New York. I did it 2 years later, but I ended up working for a nonprofit, getting myself off DC completely. But when I got off from DC, and you're absolutely right, when does the body start to finally relax, right? So it wasn't until almost 2003, because you're in this moment, right? When you're in politics, there's always the next thing. You're in the hamster wheel of it. You don't have time. And like when you're on the weekends, you're still working, right? You're in the life of a staffer. And so it wasn't until 2003, May, that I had left the House. And that's when my body reacted. And I got, my immune system was so low. And we moved into a house, and it was like the highest rain that's ever been in the DC area, or at least it was like one record year. And I got mold poisoning and no one else did. And because I look back, it was because my immune system was just shot after having had almost 3 years of really high intensity trauma. And so then my body just stopped working. And I didn't even know it was mold poisoning until someone told me. And then I had to basically evacuate from where I was living with my roommates. I had to find a whole new apartment. I had to burn most of my stuff or just throw it away. Couldn't keep it. so it was like this whole complete cleansing or complete, I don't know what it was, but it was just, and my body's never really been the same since then. So it was a real, like my insides stopped working. It was just a real getting towards the physical healing of that. But I do believe that the mold was a manifestation of my whole time of not being able to really sit there, look at what happened and deal with it. I dealt with it in the talk therapy, but I'm really not a proponent of talk therapy, to be honest with you. I do not think it's effective.
Well, I want to validate what you're saying here, because what I want our listeners to learn is two aspects here. One, research has found that our body holds on to emotion, its frequency, and there's a book, The Body Keeps Score, and I love the book and how it describes, and when you have anxiety and things like that, yes, it turns into digestive issues, but when we hold on to deep-seated root issues, it gets to be more. So our faith-based listeners, here's the thing. David went through an episode where he kept silent about what he went through. So much so that in Psalms, he writes that my bones, my body was it was becoming waste, meaning that he was so depressed that he had the weakness in his bones that he could not do anything. And this is what I want our listeners to learn, is that keeping silent because of your trauma and you don't want to deal with the pain. We understand we don't want to deal with the pain. Who wants to relive it? And I can see where you're saying talk therapy did not help you. But at the same time, David says, well, I spoke and I became, I started healing again. So I think there's an exception here to accept what happened. And so here you are, you went to therapy. What was next for you in your healing process that helped you to come out of this sickness that you were in?
I got physically healed almost like when I did the fasting, and I got to do colonics and cleansing. So the physical thing became better, but I was never the same physically. I went and did cleanses I did like a fast almost every 6 months to make sure I didn't get back into having mold into my body. And then I moved to New York, and I was still having issues in the sense of with the trauma, like, because the trauma's with you. I was really depressed and had anxiety, which I didn't have before, managing that and getting help for that as well. But it didn't really solve itself. And I never really took it to be 9/11, but what also with mold poisoning does enhance anxiety issues. So you can have a lot more anxiety because of the mold poisoning. So it was all like mixed together, and you have to live life. And I remember when I was in New York, I had the privilege of getting, with the 5-year reunion, was to actually go down to the pools that they had. They were still under construction, but I was there with the survivors of 9/11. And that was a healing journey, part of the healing journey for me. And I felt like I could come to rest with it. I went to a psychiatrist up in New York. He helped me with my depression because it was quite severe. And he was like, you need to get medication for it. So I don't like taking medication, but I took medication for 2 months and I felt better. And I just accepted that some of this is just going to be the way it is. And so, right. But it wasn't until, and it's interesting because what I think first responders get the attention and they get kind of help. Everyone needs more and more help. There's this underlying, I think you could always get more help, right? But us that were staffers in this, we never really had the moment in time for us to really grapple with that we also suffered. It's not that we suffered the way the people that have victims that perished. I'm not saying that at all, but I think we all had our level of PTSD or suffering, we that were close to it. And then what happened was I ended up moving back to Norway, and I could never talk about 9/11. I never talked about it. And it wasn't, and even like with my family knew I had gone through it, but we just never talked about it. It was just something that happened and you just went forward. I had my counseling, we talked about things, but it wasn't really like, this is what you need to do. And so when I came to Norway, and I remember when someone was asking me about 9/11, this was year 14 of having this happening, I couldn't talk. I just started crying. And I realized, wow, there's still something there that I need to deal with. And so someone recommended to me a therapist. It's called EQ therapy in Norwegian. It's not really anywhere else other than in the Scandinavian regions, but it's really the science of understanding. The whole base of the book, The Body Keeps Score. How do you release the emotions of your body? And so I went to her, and then within 3 sessions, I would say I was like 90% better. It was like amazing. It was like incredible therapy, because what it did was it went to the heart of the problem. And it's not to say that talk therapy didn't help. It's, of course, anything you do, but the progress is so minuscule and so slow when I can go to 3 sessions and it goes like this. And so it was absolutely fantastic. And then what was so ironic was that I was part of this running group where we travel around Europe, meet, and we run a 5K, and we're like all these from Norway, and we just have this fun girls trip. And you can do that in Norway because it's almost like if I was going to live here and go to Florida for the weekend, right? But you just go to Budapest for the weekend, or you go to Riga, and you go to Latvia or something. Right. And so we did that. And I didn't realize that I was actually flying on 9/11 because the months are switched there. It's like 11/9.
Oh, yeah.
They don't do 9/11. Not we in the US, we start with the month and then the day, right? But they start with the day and the month. And I was frantic that I was flying on 9. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I know I can talk about it. I know I feel better about it. But there was this lump in my stomach that I'm actually going to fly on this day. And even though it's been 14 years, I was still feeling that.
You were
and
still
that
triggered.
Yeah, but I wasn't triggered in the way where I couldn't talk about it. It was like, it was a trigger that almost like you feel like it's gonna leave your body, right? And so it's already left my body with her. And that was so ironic because that was like just a couple of weeks before this 14-year anniversary. And then what happened on the 14-year anniversary, what happened that year, and like year 15, like the big moments, that's when you have the national the responders, it's the big hoorah, right? And they are in the limelight. But year 14 for me was the year of the staffers, because Ari Fleischer, who was the press secretary for President Bush, made a comment on Twitter, and it was like all these people were making comments, and then I did too. So I saw myself, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to fly on 9/11. So I wrote this whole post on Facebook about it, and when I did that, I started interacting with all these staffers from DC that I hadn't spoken to in almost 14 years.
So you're saying in 14 years, you kept silence about this. And then all of a sudden you're triggered again. And now you're able to kind of write about it in social media. You're tweeting about it. You're responding. You write this post. How were you feeling in the moment that you were writing and just now expressing this?
Well, I think because I had gone through those 3 days, released a lot, I could really release it. And it was so interesting to see how year 14 was the year of the staffers for me, because we were all communicating. And I could not run. And I told my friends during that weekend, all I did that weekend was communicate on social media. I was in my hotel room crying, and I was connecting with people that had the same shared experience. And there was something so powerful of that shared experience and communicating, DMing, private messaging. And then at the same time, being with the most wonderful community of friends that I have, right? So I had like my present friends with my past friends. So like in the morning before I went to breakfast, I was just communicating with all these people. And it became like this flooding of all these people that were talking. I had it like this. I had it like this. And it was almost like our suffering got to have a light, right? Our suffering got to be seen and heard, right? I think it was really a time because you feel guilty. You don't want to talk about your suffering when someone has suffered more, when someone has died from 9/11, when victims of family, right? And the first responders, that you feel guilty looking at what you've done. But it was almost like year 14 became the year of the staffer. That's what I call it, the year of the staffer. At least it was that for me. And I was reconnecting with a lot of the people from Hatch's staff, from other people I was working with, and just crying of joy and love, and knowing that I have reminded of the community that I had with the people in DC, having my friends in the present loving me. And it became like the most beautiful healing weekend for me. And it was wonderful to not be at home, but to be in a completely different country, different environment, and allowing myself. I didn't run the 5K race. I was just in the present moment. And it was an amazing healing. And that's when I could really start talking about 9/11. And what really triggered it beforehand was I was asked, because I worked in crisis communication, I worked for a crisis company where we actually deal with terrorism, pandemics, and so forth. And what really triggered it, I forgot, was what triggered it was that they wanted me to speak about this on stage.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I didn't want to speak on stage, and I started almost crying. And they were like, they didn't understand how I could deal with it that way. That's why I got the help with the EQ therapy. And then fast forward was this 14th year anniversary. And since then it's not been a problem, but that was the year of healing. So I think sometimes you can't push. I think sometimes it is just about time, but I do believe somatic therapy, and I do believe if I'd incorporated somatic therapy sooner, if I'd incorporated EQ therapy, it wouldn't have lasted 14 years for me to talk about it. It would have probably been a lot shorter. And I think this is where I'm so glad to see that the therapy community is moving beyond just talk, but actually seeing how important the emotions that are in your body, like Gabor Mate talks about, the whole thing about it's in your body and how do you release the somatic part of it. So
it's fascinating. I've got a great friend who we went through our candidacy together. We worked at an inpatient hospital together. Now she's thriving, got a certification in somatic experience. Whitney Spencer here in Tulsa area does this. And I do believe that our body is able to release these things. But here's where I want our listeners to know something here. What advice would you give somebody that's going through, PTSD or that's hanging on to this stuff? What advice or courage could you give them in facing what you faced?
Take it seriously. I think sometimes we don't know that we've gone through PTSD. It's kind of like COVID. I think a lot of people, and it was interesting, COVID didn't impact me really at all. And I think that was because of my 9/11 experience and I was able to manage it at a totally different level with some of the people that I know. I can see the signs of how I felt after 9/11. I was not at all impacted by COVID in a emotional PTSD way. And I think it's because of that experience. But I do believe people that have gone through COVID had people that die. And I've met several people that really can't even talk about it, is to really take a moment that doesn't seem serious. Because I think when you're in the moment of something tragic, you don't see how serious it is until someone mirrors and reacts to what you've gone through. And if someone is reacting quite, oh my God, I can't believe you've gone through that, I would then take a mental note of that and really reflect, is there something here that I need to do to heal? Because we diminish the experience that we've done. And I think we as staffers, we diminished it because we weren't in the hierarchy of pain of 9/11. We were maybe we were like level 5, right? We were like down at the bottom. So we were like, I wasn't taking my own experience seriously. I went to counseling. I just talked about F&F, but it wasn't until I was going to be asked to share the stage on it that it really triggered me. And that's when I took notice of my trigger, because it was the experience of almost crying in front of someone that's asking you to speak and you're totally going crazy. I'm like,
Right.
like what's going on here? And then, there's residue, right? And so I think someone that's don't think, because even a death can be a PTSD, right? It's like we all react differently to tragedy. And so you can't put on a scale, oh, this is low, this is high. But what we end up doing as people, because society and culture has this kind of like, this is worse than this, like even the flooding that's happening right now in North Carolina, which is absolutely tragic. A lot of them might just people that are just giving them food and stuff like that, not even thinking that they might have a reaction. So taking seriously on how you're actually responding to it. And if you see that you have a little bit of an extra reaction to it, you're being triggered, that's when you're going to want to do something. And I think the first thing you're going to want to do is talk therapy with somatic healing, with the body, because I do believe the body is where it holds a lot of it.
I totally agree. And being able just to find a supportive community that is able to be there for you, because oftentimes when you think about what we've gone through, there could be long-term trauma too, just by talking about it and reliving it again. But being able to seek help is the first thing that I highly recommend to people who want to get healing. And here you are, Torund, you're living proof that of the impact of tragedy. I mean, the heart of the nation got impacted by what you went through. And so here we are, we give our listeners hope. And we got about 5 minutes left. But Torund, I mean, here's this amazing story. You find EQ therapy. It's helped you in 3 sessions. And do you feel like you still have PTSD? And then what I want to our listeners to understand is, where is hope? What did you do now? Because I noticed your book in the background. Tell us a little bit about, here you are, overcoming PTSD. What have you done going forward to heal?
Well, I do believe the one component that we have forgotten, which is the most important forgotten, is my faith. I think with therapy is a limitation. I think somatic healing is a limitation. I really think the bedrock of my faith is really what has helped me manage anything in my life,
Right.
And so I think tap into the faith that you have, whatever it is. But it's really, I think, believing that there's something bigger, believing that life has meaning, I think is central. And then going forward, you're always going to have issues or triggers, but it's not necessarily 9/11. It's just, in life we're not perfect.
No, and I thank God that I just thank God in my own personal life of what I've been through. So I completely align with you that faith is important to get through a lot of the tragedy and moments that we've been through.
And having people around you that have the sense of making room to be, that you're seen, you're heard, and you're forgiven, and then you forgive, right? It's that's the bedrock of anything. And that's the criteria I have when I look for people that are in my life. So going forward, you just live life. I enjoy the present more than ever, but I continually improve, because it's like I love the Bible verse where it says, don't look at the speck in someone else's eye, but look at the log in your own. And I do believe the more we can heal the interior part of our lives, we become a better citizen, and we become better of helping and supporting people. So I think personal development is a life journey. I think it's a journey of always wanting to be better and better. And I do hope as I get older that I am. And I do believe I'm at the best version I am now. So I think that's what I would encourage the listeners to, is just always reflect and just remember any kind of moment that happens in history, like take a mental check, like with COVID or anything that you're seeing, death, there could be something there. And if you're overreacting to something in life, like when I overreact to something, I admit it, right? this was a trigger. And then admit it, and then I work on it, I reflect on it, and then I figure out what's the next time I'm going to respond to that. But I think we all have triggers, and I don't think it's just necessarily something as extreme as 9/11. I think we all have moments in life where we've been disappointed, we've been alienated, and I do believe it's so important that we don't discriminate against someone's experience. Like someone's experience that might look very lighthearted to me might be the first time they've ever experienced being alienated, and that could possibly have the same Richter level as my 9/11, right? And so we can't judge the tragedies because everyone responds differently.
And that's true. We all respond differently, and the hope is that there is healing, and you presented that, and so here you are helping other people through a lot of these things, and how much joy does that bring to you? Here you overcome PTSD, and now you're helping other people. So the next 3 minutes, what are you doing that's helping people that brings you so much joy, Torund?
Well, my profession is I help people with their message to become more visible so they can change the world. That's what I do as a profession. And then as a friend, I'm a friend, right? I'm a friend. I'm a daughter. I'm an aunt. I take care. I just be the best version of me, go to church, have my life. So I don't know. That's kind of how I am. I think as older you get, your grandiose visions become more grounded. And for me, I believe in, coming with your ideas, put them out into the forefront, and just serving in the smallness. And then in what I do as a profession, I help people's voices become bigger so that society has the potential of becoming better.
Totally agree. And that's what Coach Soul is about. It's about bringing community together, to allowing other people to know that you can become a better version of you. Mm-hmm. I look at my own self and look at the better version of who I am. And, I was so ecstatic when sitting before my chair and get passed through research. And so now I'm in my research phase of my dissertation and soon become Dr. Steve. And hopefully, I don't know where this is going to take me. Sky is not the limit. The universe is just so much to explore the unknown. Torund, we thank you so much for your time of taking the time out to explain the tragedy, but overcoming. But bottom line is that it's difficult to overcome something when you lack in the faith of something higher that delivers you. And I know we sometimes tend to blame God. I know I did when I had cancer. But I realized I had to stop asking why, because that was a judgmental attitude on myself, to asking, what do I need to learn? And I needed to learn lean on something higher than myself, gain a sense of community so that I'm not alone. And so until next time, listeners, take care and God bless. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Coach Soul, where we aim to empower and uplift you on your journey toward personal growth and well-being to become a better you. Remember, as you navigate through life, you don't have to do it alone. We encourage you to reach out to professionals, seek support from loved ones, and prioritize your own well-being. Stay tuned for future episodes with Steve Hudgins, filled with valuable insights and actionable tips. You have the power to thrive, and with Coach Soul by your side, anything is possible. Until next time, take care, stay empowered, and keep shining your brightest light. For more information, contact Coach at coachedsoul.com.